What's up guys, this is Wim from the Melodic Techno Academy, and in this video you will learn the 3 essential levels of a melodic techno hi-hat and how to really get that professional sound in your tracks. So before we move on to the pro level, it's very important that we all master the very base level of a melodic techno hi-hat. And for that I already got a little project here set up with just a kick and a bass line here. And usually when we create some hi-hat sounds, it's very important that we're gonna add to the groove that is already in our track. And the easiest way for that is just to take, for example, your bass line or a main pluck sound that is in your track, and we're just gonna copy this over here. Right now it's in the B note, so just gonna move this back to C here. And for the beginner level, we're gonna start off by using some samples. And that is already the most important thing when we wanna create some professional sounding hi-hats, is to really take your time and flick through a lot of samples here. And for that I already got a drum rack here set up where we can just load up a couple different samples and then flick through them real quick and see which one is grooving the best. So because we have quite a progressive and fast sounding track, we want to choose in general quite short sounding hi-hats. Of course we could also take a longer one and just shorten up the decay time a little bit, but now we can just go into the MIDI here and just see which one is sounding the best. So I think they're all grooving quite nicely in the track. For now I'm just gonna go with the 2. And of course we don't need to keep it like that. We can also improve this groove a little bit because we have this very progressive vibe in the track. We can just kind of make a 16th note pattern out of this. And for that I'm just gonna fill in the gaps. So you can see just like that we already created quite a nice groove. So something that is always very important for me is to play around with the velocity of the first note, because this one is hitting on the kick, and sometimes it's nice to turn it up a bit and give the kick a little bit more punch, and sometimes it's nicer to just turn it down and kind of get this sidechain vibe where we are going up here in a small ladder, and usually you could also go back down here a little bit, and that works the best for me most of the time. So this one is adding some extra drive on the kick. And like this we get a little bit more of this pumping feeling, which I like for now, and now we can go back and really apply this to the whole groove here. So just like that we already nailed the very base level of a melodic techno hi-hat. Let's move on to level 2, where we're gonna apply some advanced processing and texturing on this hi-hat. So a very common technique in the melodic techno scene is to apply some additional noise layers to your hi-hat sound. And the most used effect for this is of course the vocoder in Ableton. And we can take it to about 50%, so we also get a little bit of that original hi-hat sound. Can shorten the release time up usually quite a bit, and what is also nice to play around with the format function here, just adding some higher noise. And this already sounds quite nice, but what I also like to do is just to take this to 4 voices over here and really take down the low frequencies and just gonna apply a little bit of the higher frequencies here. So like this we get this more original noise sound, and now we can take this down even a little bit more. And the amazing thing about this is that we can also start to modulate the hi-hat by playing around with the release time. But we can even take this a couple steps further by adding even a little bit more movement to this hi-hat, and I really like to use the auto pan for this. And I already have my own presets here where we just get a little bit of pan movement in that hi-hat. So usually I wouldn't go too far with this because at some point it becomes very noticeable, and also the mastering engineer is probably gonna boost your track a little bit more in the stereo field, so then it becomes even more noticeable. So somewhere around 10 to 30% is the range which I'm usually going for. And we're still having quite a lot of low frequencies in the mix here because of the vocoder effect, so I'm just gonna load up a very simple equalizer. So I think we already came quite a long way. This is sounding way more professional and interesting in your track, and especially over the long run of a 7-minute track, this is really making a big difference here with the automations on the release time. And let's move on to level 3 of a melodic techno hi-hat, where we're gonna synthesize our own hi-hat sounds. And we're gonna use Diva for this, but of course you can do this in pretty much every other synthesizer. So for that I'm gonna use a different filter mode here. And we're going to turn the cutoff here all the way up. What we can already do is boost a little bit of that resonance, because this one is boosting the very high frequencies here of the cutoff filter. And of course we can play around with that later. I'm going to use the analog envelopes here, and we're just going to set this to a very short timing. But now of course we only need a noise and no oscillators here. And now the amazing thing about Diva is, for example, that we can play around with the different modules here and really see which noise is sounding the best, because they all have a bit of a different sound to them. And the noise still has a lot of low frequencies. We could use a high pass filter over here and already filter out a bit of that mud. And of course the amazing thing is now that we can also play around with the decay settings. And straight out of the synth it sounds quite raw, so we can definitely add quite a lot of processing to this one. And first of all I also want to cut out a couple of those lower frequencies here. And you probably noticed that in this hi-hat here we actually don't really have that groove that we applied earlier here with the velocities. And the reason for that is that we need to apply a little bit of velocity modulation here, and you can do this very fast in Diva. And we can even do the same thing that we did with the sample and just apply a little bit of additional noise layer. That's just always very nice to use because we have the stereo mode here. And what I also really like to use is the effect rack by Sound Toys, just to give it a little bit more movement. We can just use a little bit of the decapitator, and we can also use the Echo Boy to get a little bit more stereo movement in that hi-hat. And the delay is usually also always helping us to really balance our movements on the decay, because sometimes you might be moving this up and down quite fast, but the delay is really smoothing those movements out a little bit, so it's a really nice tool here. This sounds quite interesting already. Let's add the same auto pan effect that we also used before. And we could also add a little bit of compression, which is also helping to balance those decay movements, because it becomes noticeably louder when we add longer noise envelopes here. So what I really like to use for my drums is the VCA compressor by Arturia. And finally, let's see how this is sounding in our track. But a closed hi-hat sound is not the only thing that we can create in a plugin. Let's just duplicate this track and also create a shaker sound. And we can leave all of the processing for now. And this is very easy. You're just gonna apply a little bit of attack time. Now the delay is actually becoming a little bit too noticeable, and I think we don't really need it, so let's turn it off. And we could also make this a little bit of a darker sound. Let's check that together in the mix. So really nice to play around with this, and works especially great if you combine this also with another noise closed hi-hat. But now I want to show you one more very famous sound that we can create in the plugin, and you probably also already heard that in a lot of tracks. For that we're just gonna use the very basic Moog setup here. We only want to turn up the noise. We can boost a little bit of that cutoff filter here, and this time we also want to add the second envelope here. And this is usually not meant, for example, for a closed hi-hat sound, but it's really nice to add some more interesting grooves in your track. So I'm just gonna play a little sequence here on my keyboard. So that should work. Very simple short sequence here. We're just gonna go in here and quantize this. And of course, you could also go in here and do some automations on the cutoff, but the nice thing is that we already have a lot of velocity applied. We can also apply it on the volume modulation here. And what we could do is take a little bit of the sustain down here and also shorten the decay up slightly. And what is nice sometimes to also add a little bit of delay here. I took some extra time here and created a little preset pack for you guys, and this is absolutely free to download in the description. Let me know if you liked this video by dropping a like and maybe even a comment down below. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one.